Good afternoon. I'm Dr. David Ferriss with the MaxWell Clinic, and I want to welcome you to our latest group visit, which is the latest in a series of topics that we're covering to communicate information that we as clinicians think is important for our patients to understand. Today, we're going to be talking about how health begins in the gut and just how important it is for us to have good gut health and why it matters, not only for physical health, but for our mental health as well. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. You will be on mute, but if you have a question, please type your question into the Q&A box, and I'll attempt to answer as many of those questions as time permits after the remarks that I make. And in the unlikely event that the internet goes down, we will switch to a hotspot. So just hang on for a few minutes, and we'll hopefully be able to continue the webinar in the unlikely event that we have an internet connection problem. All right, let's jump in. I want to start with a couple of definitions. You'll hear the terms human microbiota and human microbiome. When we talk about human microbiota, we're referring to all the different microbes, probably well over 1,000 different microbes that reside on and in each of our bodies. When we talk about the human microbiome, we're talking about all of the microbial genes that reside in and on the human body. So human microbiota refers to all the microbes themselves. When we talk about the human microbiome, we're talking about all of the genes in that collective group of microbes that reside in or on our body. So each of us as human beings has approximately 10 trillion cells that comprise our bodies. But each of us has approximately 100 trillion microbial cells in and out of our body. So in a very real sense, our human cells are way outnumbered by our microbial cells. Furthermore, each of us as humans has approximately 20,000 genes, but we carry some 2 to 20 million microbial genes in and on our bodies. This means each of us has far more microbial genes than human genes in our bodies. Another way of looking at this is to say that 92% of the total genes in our bodies come from microbes, which is a little daunting when we think about it. And these microbes and their genes play a more important role than we can imagine. The research in this area of the human microbiome, and particularly the gut microbiome, which we're going to focus on today, has been exploding over the last couple of decades and continues to explode. Research has linked microbes to a number of conditions, and these are only some, and the list continues to grow. But obesity, arthritis, autism, anxiety, and depression are all conditions which there has been established a significant microbial link in terms of the effect that the composition of the microbes, particularly in our guts, have on these conditions. So what I'd like to do next to kind of set the stage for the rest of the presentation is to show you a short video. This is a video that I came across several years ago. I've used it in a number of presentations, and I think it tells in an engaging and humorous way, communicates a lot about the importance of our gut microbiome and its significance for us. So let's hope the technology works, and we'll play this, and then I'll continue.
The next time you look in the mirror, think about this. In many ways, you're more microbe than human. There are 10 times more cells from microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, than human cells in and on our bodies. And our genes are outnumbered 100 to 1 by microbial genes. Scientists even have a name for all these microbial genes, the human microbiome. Now, this might make a lot of people rush for the hand sanitizer. But it turns out most of these microorganisms aren't bad, germs that will make us sick. Most are good. And without these good microbes, our bodies don't seem to do as well. We don't seem to be as healthy, and we actually might get sick more often. So one question is, where do our microbiomes come from in the first place? Well, like a lot of things, it starts with our mothers. As the infant passes through the birth canal, it gets coated with microbes from the mom. These microbes may kind of seed the baby with just the right mix. Combined with bacteria in breast milk and other microbes we encounter early on, they seem to slowly take shape in our first few years of life. The overall mix of our microbes becomes very personal, sort of like a fingerprint or maybe a blood type. But our microbes tend to resemble those of our parents and siblings and may stay with us for much of our lives. They may also be doing all sorts of things, such as educating our immune cells, like this one, teaching them the difference between things they should fight off, bad bugs that might make us sick, and things that aren't a threat, like our good microbes. When we're adults, microbes become our first line of defense, fighting off germs that try to invade our bodies, protecting their turf while protecting our health. Scientists have discovered they can even spew out their own antibiotics. The types of microbes in your body vary depending on exactly where they lived, like different ecosystems in nature. There are wet places like our mouths, noses, and armpits, oily places like our scalps and backs, and dry places like our forearms. Different species of microbes have adapted to each of these habitats. The biggest, most important microbial habitat seems to be in the gut. It's the most complex, the most diverse, and everything microbes are doing everywhere else in our bodies, fighting off infections, revving up and dampening down our immune systems, signaling cells, that's all happening in the gut in spades. They even seem to help regulate our metabolisms, how much energy we burn, and how much fat we store. So if it's not functioning for some reason because of what we eat, antibiotics we take, that may actually lead to all kinds of diseases. Diseases like colon cancer, colitis, maybe even diabetes and obesity. Some scientists think one reason a lot of diseases are increasing is because we've lost key gut microbes. Our microbiomes look far less diverse compared to those of people in less developed countries and earlier generations. And remember how we get our microbiomes in the first place? From our mothers when we're born and from breast milk? Well, some scientists think that too many babies aren't getting that because of all the C-sections and not enough breastfeeding, plus all the antibiotics kids get these days and our obsession with cleanliness. All this may help explain why problems like asthma and allergies have been soaring. Maybe because our microbiomes never taught our immune systems how to work the right way. Maybe swallowing good microbes, probiotics, could prevent and treat some diseases. So could taking prebiotics, essentially food that good microbes love. We end our story with a reminder. This research is really new. We still have a lot to learn about what many of our microbes are really doing. But scientists say that it's getting clearer and clearer that the tiny organisms all over our bodies are essential to our health and happiness.
Oops, there we go, sorry. So I hope that was helpful in just giving a nice overview of the importance of our microbial friends to health. And as the video said, we first get our microbes from our mothers. An unborn child, to the best that we understand now, although there's some debate about this, basically start as sterile. They don't have any microbes on them or in them. But as the baby passes down through the birth canal of the mother, then the baby picks up the microbial flora in the mother's vaginal tract, and that inoculates the baby, their guts and their skin, their mucous membranes, for what is the beginning of a very important immune defense and a regulator of so many things with respect to health. As the video pointed out as well, babies born by means of C-section, which has been a significant percentage of children in past decades, they have different microbes because they're not passing through the vaginal tract of the mother. And so they're going to pick up their first microbes from typically their mother, from nurses caring from them, from others through skin contact. And they're going to be seeded with very different microbes than others. And we think this may be one of the reasons that C-section is associated with increased rates of asthma, immune system issues, food allergies, and atopic disease in children that were born from C-section. In fact, Dr. Rob Knight, whom I'll mention again in a minute, is one of the leading scientists in the world. He's at UC, University of California, San Diego, in this area of the gut microbiome. He tells the story of when several years ago, he and his wife had their first child, a daughter. They had to have an unexpected C-section at the last minute. And knowing what he did about the importance of inoculating newborns with the right microbes from the mother's birth canal, he actually took secretions from his wife, and they inoculated their daughter with those in order to try to mimic what would have happened had their daughter had a normal non-C-section birth. So I'm not aware that that's being done very widely or certainly routinely at this point, but it's possible that it may be in the future. So as that infant grows and develops and they start eating more solid food, probably between 6 and 9 months of age, then diet begins to influence the composition of their gut microbiomes. We know that breastfeeding versus formula feeding produces different results. I think it's well established that breastfeeding is the optimal food for newborns and babies whenever that's possible. But breast milk has certain microbes that we're still learning what role they play in the development of the baby's immune system and in the baby's overall health. It's probably fair to say that in the long term, we are what we eat, because our diets do make a huge difference in what our microbiomes of our guts look like. We know from studies in different human populations around the world that have very different diets that they have different microbes inhabiting their guts. For example, for populations who have a lot of meat in their diet, which would be true of most developed countries, including the US, these individuals tend to have much higher number of Bacteroides species in their guts. Whereas individuals that live in parts of the world where the diet has very little meat and is predominantly complex carbohydrate, grains, they have a predominance of species called Prevotella. So we're seeing these differences, still learning about what's the significance of those differences in the gut microbiome of different peoples with different diets. And what is the prevalence of different diseases, different conditions in these different populations. And more we're discovering that there's a strong tie to the gut microbiome. So let's talk about sickness and health for a minute. As I've already referenced, our microbes have already been linked to a wide spectrum of disease. This has been demonstrated both in animal studies and in human studies. And you see some of these repeated in some additions from a previous slide: inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, autism, depression, anxiety, obesity, allergy. These are some of a list which I think will become far longer, that we know that the gut microbiome and its composition has a connection in some way to these diseases. We're still trying to elaborate the details of that. I mentioned Dr. Rob Knight at UC San Diego a couple of minutes ago. He is director of the Microbiome Initiative at the University of California, San Diego, a major world research lab in this area. And he's also co-founder of the American Gut Project and the Earth Microbiome Project. These were major projects which he helped start to analyze the gut microbes of thousands, if not by now, millions of people around the world, and particularly in the US, to understand the connections between what's in our gut microbiomes and the health or the disease that we experience. And I thought this was a bit humorous, but it's based on his research and the research of others. His advice for healthy children is first have a dog, but start early. Ideally in the prenatal time. Live on a farm with cows and straw. That's probably not going to apply to most people, but at least be outside. And what you've heard about, perhaps it's okay for kids to play in the dirt a bit, and we shouldn't freak out if we see them then putting their fingers in their mouths, which particularly small children will inevitably do. It's not the end of the world. And it may play a very important role in helping train these children's immune systems to function in an optimal way. Avoid antibiotics early in life, especially. Antibiotics can be life-saving. And so we're very thankful for them, but they have been grossly overused for many years. And so good advice is not to use an antibiotic unless it's really necessary, and then to use it for as short a period of time as will eradicate the offending microbe. But this is particularly true early in life when the child's microbiome is so malleable. Children and adults will recover from a course of antibiotics, but it takes some time. It may take weeks to months for them to restore a more normal microbial composition after a course of antibiotics. And then breastfeed. As I've already alluded to, breast milk has certain microbes, which we're still learning about the impact of them on health, particularly in infants. But this is important. So in short, exposure to a diverse array of microbes is important. And we're seeing that in the adult research as well. Having a diverse number of different species, particularly species that we've identified as being particularly beneficial to health, is really important. Let me take just a moment to talk about the gut-brain axis. Undoubtedly, if you've been a patient at MaxWell Clinic for very long, you've probably heard your provider talk about the connection between the gut and the brain. And this is an area where research has exploded in recent years as we're learning more and more about how the gut communicates with the brain and how the brain communicates with the gut. There's increasing evidence that our gut microbiome influences who we become and how we feel. Microbes not only influence how we digest our food, how we absorb drugs and produce hormones, but they also interact with our immune systems to affect our brains. And it's these interactions between our gut microbes and our brains, that's what we call the gut-brain axis or the gut-brain connection. And thus far, we've elicited a number of different mechanisms for this communication between gut and brain. We know there are neuronal connections, hormonal, and immune-mediated mechanisms that enable this communication between gut and brain. So it's a fascinating area of research and one that continues to expand. As I've said earlier, we know the microbiome has been linked to depression and anxiety, and we're still trying to tease that out, and how we might use changes in the gut microbiome through therapeutic means to help reduce anxiety and depression in individuals. It's not the single thing, but it's one of a number of important factors that contribute to good mental health. In fact, there is a whole field of psychiatry that is developing and getting increasing attention called nutritional psychiatry, in which scientists are studying how diet, as we've already said, has a huge impact on the composition of our gut microbiome, and then subsequently how the gut microbiome through the brain gut axis is impacted in terms of our mental health. Probably all of you are familiar with the term probiotic. These are actual living microbial organisms that we frequently administer to patients when their gut health is less than optimal. They may be experiencing leaky gut, which is quite common. And we use these microbes in the form of probiotics for perhaps a period of months or perhaps even longer term to help bring about beneficial changes in the health of that individual. To date, there are more than 500 studies linking probiotics to behavior, especially for anxiety and depression. So again, just an area that continues to grow in its importance. So finally, I want to talk for just a minute about how can we change our microbes to improve ourselves, specifically to improve our health. We know that we modify our microbiome all the time by what we eat. If we change the balance of carbohydrates that we're eating, and the amount of protein that we're consuming, particularly animal protein, it changes the microbiome. Probably the healthiest diet, and this is not news to most of you, would be a whole food plant-based diet, one that is rich in phytonutrients, has abundant fiber in it, it's the fiber that our beneficial bacteria in our guts really thrive on. So if we want to feed the good bugs, then eat a healthy diet. Lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, legumes, whole grains, minimize the animal protein, the eggs, the dairy. They can have a place in the diet, but most individuals, particularly in the US and other industrialized countries, do not eat nearly enough complex carbohydrates. All the colors of the rainbow in the diet, lots of fiber. The other thing that impacts our microbiome is alcohol. To the extent that we utilize alcohol, it may benefit or have deleterious effects on our microbiome and our health. And then, of course, I've already spoken about the issue of antibiotics and how, while antibiotics can be life-saving, we want to use them only when really necessary to achieve the desired end and improve health because of the toll that they can take on our gut microbiomes. I've already alluded to probiotics, which are live organisms, usually delivered in a capsule form to help replenish healthy microbes in the gut when improvement is needed in an individual. There's also the category of therapeutic supplements called prebiotics. And these are really substitutes that mimic the healthy diet that I just spoke of. These are high in fiber, and they feed the healthy microbes that we want, whose growth we want to encourage in the gut. So we use a lot more probiotics than we do prebiotics. Both have a place, but again, neither one of these supplements can substitute for a healthy diet. That's foundational, along with exercise for a healthy life. Let me wrap up my remarks with an example of something that is already being more widely used. And that's in patients who have developed a chronic C. difficile infection. C. difficile is a really noxious microbe. It tends to produce severe diarrhea in individuals. Most people, when they're diagnosed, they're treated with an antibiotic, and that's appropriate. Quite a number will improve with that and be cured, but there's a certain significant subset of those individuals who are treated with antibiotics that have recurrent C. difficile, and their lives become quite miserable with the chronic diarrhea and bloating and abdominal pain that they experience. So an application of this whole area of gut microbiome science has been fecal transplants, taking fecal material from healthy volunteers who have healthy guts and transplanting that into the colons of individuals who are experiencing a C. difficile infection with all of these severe symptoms of diarrhea and other gastrointestinal distress. And so in the vast majority of these individuals who receive a fecal transplant, the results can be pretty amazing. Within many times just 1 to 2 days, there is a significant improvement in the symptoms of these individuals with C. difficile difficile infections. And a large percentage of these individuals get a complete cure. So their treatment and their cure was giving them healthy microbes from a healthy volunteer, transplanting those into the guts, into the colons of the afflicted individuals. So that's just one example. I think we will probably see many more examples of this as we learn more about our microbiome. How do we get it healthy? How do we keep it healthy? And when we're sick, how can we therapeutically manipulate our gut microbiomes to restore them to health, and improve the overall health and well-being of these individuals. So that concludes the remarks that I had planned to make. I hope this has given you at least something of a high-level overview. I anticipate that in the future, we will dive more deeply into some of the subtopics related to this in other group visits. Certainly, we could talk for some time about the gut-brain axis that I mentioned briefly and its importance to overall health and particularly to mental health. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share for the presentation, and we'll go to Q&A and see what questions. Yes, first question is one refers to Dr. Hazi's presentation last week about various supplements. And he said that there was a probiotic that it's been found that may help with weight. I'd alluded to earlier that we know the microbiome is related to obesity. And so there are probiotics with particular strains that have been found to aid achieving a more normal, a healthier body composition. So I would completely agree with what Dr. Hazi said. I think as we learn more about the microbiome, there'll probably be even more advances, and we may be able to do more in this area. Again, it won't be the magic bullet. It will be one of probably of a number of things. The most important thing we can do to achieve and maintain a healthy weight is through our diet. And that diet can directly support a healthy gut microbiome. And so just swallowing, whether there's supplements or pharmaceuticals, will not generally get us well and keep us well, certainly to optimize our health. We have to go back to those lifestyle fundamentals, but that can be helpful. Was asked the name of the supplement, and you know, it's escaping me at the minute. It is one of the probiotics that we carry. So I'm sorry, I don't want to misspeak. So I'll have to recheck that to make sure I have that correctly. But we'll be happy to tell you. I don't know whether there are other questions. If there are, I'll wait just a minute and pause to submit. Those are the only two that have come in thus far. But if you have another question, please submit that now, and I'll be happy to try to respond to that. All right, if there aren't any further questions, then thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your participation in these group visits. As we discussed doing these several months ago with the launch of MaxWell Care, our intent is to be able to talk in more detail about a wide variety of topics that we think are important for achieving Maxwell health, but that even a 45-minute or hour-long patient visit doesn't allow us the time to do that. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you for your attention. And I hope you'll keep coming back for other group visit webinars in this series. Thanks so much.